Hi, perhaps you recognize me. It's your favorite president.
We will decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come.
I mean,
I know you want to ban our national flags, but we're going to wave you goodbye.
What does confrontational mean? It means you'll fight for what you believe.
Enough was enough! And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother!
It is not merely our privilege to be strong, it is our duty to be strong.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Commanding the Narrative. My name is Tripp, and you got to love yourself a little bit of the Hulkster there. Has me fired up, ready to go already. But thank you to everyone who are watching this on Rumble, YouTube, or Facebook Live. Thank you to everyone else who watch it later on and all the various platforms that this podcast goes to out there on the World Wide Web. If you are watching us live, you can contribute in the live chat. So please do so. I love reading your comments and hearing your questions and everything. And at some point throughout the course of this interview tonight, I will put the StreamYard link in the chat. Now, if you want to call in, it's like Talkback Radio. I call it Talkback Streaming. If you want to call in, just click that StreamYard link and you can use your phone, you can use your laptop. Just come on, and as long as you're respectful, you can make a comment and ask a question. And I encourage everyone to please do so, because it does contribute to a much better conversation when we get to hear all of your views. But to start off, I'll start it off like we always do by letting you know about Buy Me a Coffee. Now, if you want to support us and everything that we're doing here at Commanding the Narrative, you can head to Buy Me a Coffee and throw us a few dollars, just like this week. Mario, Big Mario, thank you very much for buying 5 coffees this week. It contributes to the paying the stream. We've just set up a new website, helps pay for that. We've got some other plans that we would like to do as well. So every dollar that comes in contributes to this podcast and us moving forward. So thank you very much, Mario. Mario said, thanks for providing an unfiltered platform for people to speak about Australian politics. Well, thank you, Mario, and thank you very much for your contribution. It is much appreciated. And also, if you want another way of supporting us as well, is by heading to the T-shirt shop and get your own Commanding the Narrative merchandise. It is xcandidates.t-shirts.net.au, and I say this every time we have the wonderful Kevin Loughrey on. We have a Kevin for the Senate T-shirt. If you purchase that T-shirt, all profits will go to Kevin Loughrey's campaign for the Senate. So not only are you helping Kevin, but you're looking very stylish and wonderful at the same time. So that's another way to support us as well. Now, firstly, before I get to anything else, another thing you all should support is the Light newspaper. Now, the Light newspaper is looking to expand even more. It is a free newspaper to the public, but we are looking for distributors. And to distribute the Light, there is a cost involved. You will need to buy these papers. They're 15 cents a copy. So $15 for 100 if you want to hand it out in your local area. If you're in Sydney and you want to distribute the Light, please call 0406 861 816. And you can be a distributor. Or if you're outside of Sydney and elsewhere in Australia, please visit thelighaustralia.com. And with misinformation and disinformation laws coming in, censorship of the internet, hard physical copies of information may be our last resort of getting information out there in the future. So please support the Light. They've got a great collection of authors, and everything like that is another way of getting information out there. And maybe you'll be able to awaken some people of what's really going on and get the unfiltered, uncensored truth. But if you are following us, we are going through a little bit of a rebranding at the moment. If you're used to the ex-candidates on Instagram or Facebook or other places, I'm slowly shifting everything over to Commanding the Narrative. So if you've been on Instagram and you're like, where's the ex-candidates gone? Is now Commanding the Narrative. So Instagram, X, YouTube, a lot of those platforms have already been converted over. Facebook is still the same. some of them I can't change. Truth Social I can't change. That will have to stay ex-candidates. And the Rumble one, frustratingly, Rumble can't change that as well. But I'll probably create a new channel for that. So whatever you type in, whether it be ex-candidates or commanding the narrative, it should come up. But to let you guys know, going forward, we're all going to be, all the podcasts that we do are going to be under the Commanding the Narrative umbrella. And if you are unsure and you want to follow us, the best place to go is our new website, commandingthenarrative.com. Very easy for you to remember, commandingthenarrative.com. Head to the website. It's got all the podcasts there and the most recent podcasts, any articles that I might write or that I might want to support from other writers. Everything's there, and all the podcasts that we do, Commanding the Narrative, ex-candidates, global discussion forum. It's all there, and you can sign up to a weekly newsletter. I know I promised everyone who was already signed up that there will be a weekly newsletter. I'm still trying to figure out how to use MailChimp and all those other things. I've had a pretty busy week with work and everything like that, but I will get onto it. If you sign up, you will get a weekly newsletter. You can head to the top of the page and hit the sign up button, and please keep up to date with everything that we're doing, because we do put out a lot of great information with a lot of great guests, and it's just a great way of keeping up with what we're doing. So tonight, big episode. This is his first ride on Commanding the Narrative. He has been on the ex-candidates quite a lot, and I will encourage you to go back to episode 103 of the ex-candidates, because we did touch on a lot of the topics that we're going to be speaking about tonight. So that can be your introduction to this topic. But let's bring him on now. He's one of my good friends, Mr. Kevin Loughrey. Welcome to your first appearance on Commanding the Narrative.
Oh, thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you for having me. I was really pleased to get this invitation.
I always love having you on and hearing your thoughts and your wise wisdom and everything. But to let everyone know, if you want to keep up to date with everything that Kevin is doing and delve deep into his wealth of knowledge, you can head to his website, kevinloughrey.com.au. A plethora. It's almost like an encyclopedia on the web. You can go and learn about a whole bunch of different issues, Kevin's thoughts, Kevin's policies. Everything is on there, and you're working on it all the time. I know you just updated the electoral reforms. We won't be talking about that so much tonight. We'll probably do that in a future follow-up episode, but your website's always updating. You've a wealth of knowledge on there, so please, everyone, head to kevinloughrey.com.au and keep up to date with that. But Kevin, it's been a massive week, and before we get on to our main topic tonight, which is governmental reform and constitutional reform, what's happening in America at the moment does have an effect on the whole world. Not only that, it's almost like watching a movie in a sense. But we've had this assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Joe Biden looks like he's on the way out, and we just had the big Republican National Convention as well, with a lot of great speakers. But I want to play a clip for you right now. This is Dr. Chris Martenson in the US. Now, I would encourage everyone to watch this clip. It's 32 minutes long. It's a comprehensive analysis of the shooting, but this is just a clip, and I'll play it now. And I'll get Kevin's thoughts afterwards.
We just have an absolutely different sound between the first three. There's no echo. It's much further away. It's more muffled. It's just not in the same place at all. But these next ones, very different sound, totally different weapons. Okay, full stop. We have two separate weapons. Plus, we have no echoes coming off of the first three, and then we do have echoes coming off of the next set.
Okay, Kevin. Now, you were in the military for a long time. You were a lieutenant colonel. You even invented your own rifle. You should have some expertise in this. In hearing what Dr. Chris Martenson just had to say and hearing the different sounds of the shots, what are your thoughts?
Well, the first three were 5.56, and the frequency, that's to say how quickly he fired, is quite consistent with a person firing a semi-automatic 5.56, which is the same as our Steyr or what was called the Armalite. The other sounds you hear are likely something in the order of 308 or 339, and they're sniper rounds. That's the snipers firing back at the shooter. So the shooter actually got off 3 rounds before they started nailing him, and the snipers didn't fire 1 round, they fired about 5.
Are you sure? Because I heard the official report that it was just the 1 shot fired by the snipers.
No. And I can assure you that if you're in a sniper team, you don't rely on one guy hitting the target. And there were at least 3 sniper rifles that I've seen, two definitely, that were trained on the target. So no, and look, there's an awful lot of misinformation and rumor going around. One was that he brought his own ladder, and then the next thing you hear is that the ladder was actually an integral part of the building to allow people to get up onto the roof to maintain it. Yeah, look, from my ears, from what I just heard, the first 3 were from the same rifle. They were 5.56. And then the next ones had a totally different tenor to them. They were boom, boom, boom. And there were 2 there that were fired in very close order, almost like a machine gun. And that's because there were 2 snipers taking out the assailant. You don't, under those circumstances, you don't say, oh, look, I'll trust this guy to get him. If you're a sniper and and trouble is hit, you go at it. You just let fly. And their rules of engagement by that stage, really their rules of engagement, I believe, should be that if the person is posing an imminent threat, you're allowed to neutralize them. But once a person has started shooting, it's a no-brainer. You don't have to ask for permission. There's no doubt. And that's when they really hooked into it. As well as that, one of the snipers moved from visual to glass, as they say, moved from just looking to going into the scope, and actually flinched. Actually, that the level of expertise of those people was not good. And it seemed to indicate to me that they'd never, ever been shot at by an angry man. They'd never actually been in combat. So, you were dealing with a group of people who could have been good shots, were in a pretty difficult position on a sloping roof and so forth, and they were inexperienced. They hadn't actually killed somebody before. And once you've knocked over a few people as a sniper, it becomes easier and easier. You become desensitized. But the first one's always the worst one.
Well, we saw the footage of the Secret Service officer who couldn't even get the gun back in her holster.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, that's pretty hopeless. Yeah. And look, it was pretty awful.
How do you account for the people that got shot behind and the different angles that were? Because some people were not only analyzing the sounds of the shots, but also the angles and where the people that were shot were positioned behind President Trump. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Look, if you watch the slow motions, you can see that his shots were wild after the first one, and he actually hit a piece of metal on a railing, and you could actually see that the bullet then ricocheted off that and hit somebody. If you get hit by a bullet that's deformed, it's pretty awful, because all of the energy, remaining energy of the bullet, will be expended on your body. The round will not go out of your body. If you get hit by a 5.56 on the full, you can be lucky and it could pass through you. In which case they have to do excoriation of the wound, because the wound becomes, all the blood vessels around where the hole has gone, they get ruptured, and you can get gangrene over a period of time. So typically a surgeon will open the wound and excoriate it and then sew you up. Get rid of the necrotic tissue, in other words. But in this instance, you see that there were 2 shots. One hit the ground and then ricocheted up, and another one hit a piece of metal on the railing, and it deflected. It went in a different direction. So if you're looking at the trajectory of these rounds, they were completely messed up once they'd hit something and then ricocheted off.
This is why we have you on, Kevin. I rate Dr. Chris Martenson very, very highly. He's a wealth of knowledge as well. But to hear your take as well.
Well, I've obviously heard 308 and at Sniper. And the work I did was on 308, was on 762 weapons. And those weapons, the last ones that you hear, are definitely heavier caliber weapons.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's get into it. So I want to start off. You've got a presentation, but to set the ground, we're going to be talking about government and reforming government and the Constitution tonight. And I know what's going to happen. People are going to put in the comments, why do you even bother talking about this? The government's a corporation. It's all been taken over. That doesn't serve us anymore. Blah, 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 blah. My idea of government is only what the masses agree to. So if people out there believe that there is a place called the Parliament House, and within the Parliament House there's elected representatives, and they're passing laws, on behalf of us, and you can even influence those people that are in the Parliament to pass laws by protesting or sending them emails or calling up their office or whatever it might be. At the end of the day, the masses, the public, do have sway over the government, whether you think it's a corporation or whether you think it's a traditional form of government that we're all led to believe. There's people out there that say that local government is unconstitutional. Well, my view is that, yes, local government isn't included in the Australian federal constitution, but that's because it's a creation of the states. It's in the state constitutions. There's nowhere in the federal constitution that says you can't have local government. It's just left out. And for example, where I grew up in Petersham, that was Marrickville Council. Marrickville Council was established in 1861. So that was before the federal constitution. Local governments predated a lot of this stuff. Another thing I've heard people say is, you don't need a driver's license. I mean, you can drive around without a driver's license, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, try that one.
Well, look, here's the thing. If you walk up to if you go through the street, you go down to George Street in Sydney where it's packed of people, and you go up to as many people as you can and say, do you think people should have a driver's license to drive a car in Australia? Most people, overwhelming majority of people, whether they've been brainwashed or not, they will say you do need a driver's license to drive a car in this country. So in my view, that is what government is. When the masses agree that this is what we need as a society to go forward, essentially that is what government is. You can argue about all the minutiae behind the scenes, and there was this law written and that law was written, blah, blah, blah. But the consciousness of the people and what they view government to be, that's what government is. Would you agree with a lot of what I've said?
Yeah, and in fact, I'd even go further and say that the masses don't even have to agree. You have a system of government which is an elected, your elected representatives sit in the House of Representatives or the Legislative Assembly at the state level. They contrive law, create acts of Parliament, and these are passed sometimes through an upper and lower house. In Queensland, they don't have an upper house, and those laws are then those acts of Parliament become law. And then a public servant turns the laws into regulations such that the regulations are the way that the law will be implemented. And sometimes public servants get it wrong. They overreach or they misstate, in which case the regulation isn't in keeping with the Act of Parliament. And so you do have some comeback there. But then the police are duty bound to enforce whatever the law is, a la the regulation. So if you break a regulation and a policeman catches you, that policeman will be armed. You try to resist him, he'll use a taser on you or a weapon, depending on what sort of threat you present. You'll be handcuffed, taken to a police station, you'll be arraigned, you'll go before a magistrate. There will be a hearing, and then there'll be a sentencing. And depending on what you've done, you'll either end up in jail or you'll be paying a heavy fine. Now, if you say, I'm not going to pay the fine, then you'll go to jail. And all of this happens. And as much as you might sit there screaming, oh, this is unlawful, yada, 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 the fact of the matter is you'll be in jail for a long time. And in the end, if you want to really fight it, you'll lose your house, you'll lose your family. No, you're right on the money. The way to fix all of this is by using the law, by using the existing regulations. And what we're about to talk about tonight is how we can fix something that is decidedly deficient. It's not broken, but it's totally deficient. And these deficiencies allow people, enemies, foreign and domestic, to do great damage to the Australian people and this country. And that's what this is all about.
And to go to the extreme, at the end of the day, a law or a constitution or legislation or whatever it might be is just text on a paper. It's just writing on a paper. If the masses decide to have an uprising or a rebellion, all that goes out the window. So you need,
if you have a total refusal to comply by the community, which would be rare in Australia, but if you do have a complete refusal to comply, the police will more or less say, well, look, we really don't want to be involved in this, and they would step back. Although you saw in Victoria some extreme acts of brutality perpetrated by the police on people who were peaceful protesters. So I'm not even sure that's true. I was looking at some policemen the other day. I actually went to the police station for another reason. I have a license, a particular type of license. And I was looking at them, and honestly, I haven't even seen anything like that in the military. The way these guys were dressed, they looked almost like Darth Vader. Unbelievable, the amount of hardware they have hanging off them, and most of that hardware is designed to hurt somebody. So I'm thinking to myself, when I was a young boy, and this is back in the 50s, policemen in Queensland used to dress in khaki and wear a broad-brimmed hat, and they didn't carry a weapon. And if they did carry a weapon, it had to be under a jacket, like a safari jacket, hidden from view. I remember as sort of like a 4-year-old going 5, I'd been fostered out at this stage, and I was at this house, and this policeman turned up who was a friend of the people in the house, and he had a weapon under his safari jacket. And we said, oh, can we have a look at it? And he pulled this weapon out. It was unloaded. He checked that it was unloaded. And then he let us touch it. We weren't allowed to hold it. But it was the most beautiful thing I can remember. It was a bright blue metal Smith & Wesson type revolver that the chap had. But it's just so different now. These people are dressed in a fashion that says they're expecting someone to carry out an extreme act of violence upon them, and they will reciprocate. And really, their dress is a comment on our society or where our society has gone. Something's gone badly wrong.
Look, and especially since we don't have guns here in Australia. I mean, we have gun laws here. And I remember when I was growing up, you watch movies, the cops in the movies, whether they be in America or elsewhere, had just a pistol or a Glock or something like that. And the bad guys were the ones with the machine guns. And but anyway, you're right. It does show that we are going down the slippery slope, unfortunately. Now, that's why you're here, to address this. We have an aim of maybe potentially taking these thoughts and forming maybe a group or or a lobby group or something like that. A foundation.
I'd like us to think about forming a foundation, and we could call it the Reform Democracy of Australia, or Reform Australian Democracy. That slides off the lips pretty well. Reform Australian Democracy Foundation. I would actually like every person in Australia to be aware of what I'm about to show them, and for people to discuss it. I don't believe that I'm infallible, but what I'm about to provide could be the focus of discussion, which could then be molded into something better. So, yeah.
Well, look, I've just set up a new email. It's commandingthenarrative@outlook.com. If anyone at home watching has any interest in this and want to provide your thoughts, send me an email, commandingthenarrative@outlook.com. And if we do proceed with anything, Kevin and I can get you involved or keep you updated, whatever it may be. But let's get into it. You're going to give a presentation now. I'm going to step out for a little bit. I'll make comments here or there maybe, but this is a presentation that you've been working on for quite some time. I'm going to give you the floor to present it to the audience now.
Okay, well, as it says, in this presentation, I'll identify serious deficiencies that exist in Australia's present system of government. And I'll suggest how these deficiencies may be remedied so as to increase the probability government will not pass capricious legislation and regulations and make better use of the funds provided to it by the Australian taxpayer. Next slide. Okay, we do a snapshot of where we're up to now, but by the way, it's a lot worse than what I had room to fit on this particular slide. The country's over $1 trillion in debt, and that's really serious. The government has imported over 1 million migrants in the last 3 years, and housing is unaffordable for many, and particularly for young people. And I am extremely worried about that. If we do not look after our young people, if we don't help them have stability and be able to have children, we do not have a society. We will eventually, in the next 50 years, become extinct, and this country will be taken over by another group of people. The manufacturing industry in this country has been gutted. Property rights have been eroded by things like native title and the UN treaties that we've entered into, this country has entered into. Free speech has been attacked. You've got things like the Racial Discrimination Act, which can put you in jail if you happen to say something that somebody feels is racially inflammatory, which is an awful thing. People should be allowed to say basically anything they like except to incite violence. The cost of energy has greatly increased. We don't have an adequate fuel supply. We only have 24 days of liquid fuel in this country. If we get cut off, even our defence forces cannot function and operate. The health of the nation's been destroyed by forced mRNA anti-COVID injections and the deliberate denial of effective early treatment for this disease. Next slide. Okay, reiterating the root causes of this. Now, I say reiterating because I've actually got 2 other presentations which are, basically a trilogy of what you're seeing now. We decided to do this one because I think the audience will find it the most interesting. The root causes of our present predicament is the poor quality of political candidates and the low quality of compulsory vote, leading to poor quality politicians, compounded by deficiencies in the Westminster system of government, where these poor quality politicians have far too much power. Next slide. Okay, I want to remind you that history teaches us that politicians can never be trusted, and anybody who takes no interest in history is bound to repeat its problems, its failures. Next. Also remember that all governments start off with good intentions, but over time, governments become more and more controlling. They just can't help themselves. They see it as their role to create more and more law in Parliament instead of saying, look, we have enough laws. How about we go through the laws we have and find out those that are no longer appropriate and get rid of them? But no, they just keep on creating more and more laws and they become more and more controlling. Next slide. Okay. How do you limit political power? Well, you do it through a constitution, which is another presentation of mine, and by having independent branches of government. The idea is that you don't concentrate too much power in the hands of a few. You distribute it. And when you do that, there's a certain competition that happens between the executive, judiciary, and legislature. They no longer regard themselves as being friends. They are competing with each other. And the executive competes against the legislature against the executive, and the judiciary sits there in the middle trying to arbitrate and mediate the whole schmozzle. Next one. Okay, illustrating the point that there's no independence between the executive and legislative branches, understand that the Governor-General is nominally the head of the public service, but the legislative branches of government appoint the Governor-General. And you can see from their latest appointment, and you will see this also in the states, that the Governor-Generals and governors of the states are largely political appointees. And they are certainly not the sort of person you would entrust $1 trillion public service to run. Next one. Okay, with regard to the judiciary, most people don't think about this, but the Attorney General is actually an integral part of the legislature. The Attorney General is picked by the PM and Cabinet and is a part of the Cabinet. And in the case of Labor, the Attorney General is picked by a caucus, which oftentimes is communist, or at least, at the very least, fascist socialist. So you've got this person who is an Attorney General, who's a part of the legislature, and yet he heads the judiciary, the Attorney General's department, and he could hardly be called independent. And you could see from that he's a politician, first law officer, and a member of the legislature. Next slide. Okay, another little safety valve that we have in our system of government, we have what's called a bicameral system of parliament, where you have an upper and a lower house. And they deliberately organised the method of voting for the upper house and the lower houses to be different, in the hope that the upper house would be of a different political complexion. The upper house represents the estate. That's why there are the same number of senators from every state. The lower house is supposed to represent the people and supposed to be proportional. So electorates are broadly the same number of people, one person, one vote type of principle. The idea of the upper house is that it has a different political complexion to the lower house. So when the lower house makes or passes a piece of legislation up to the upper house will be a house of review and will, we hope, argue strenuously and debate strenuously the virtues and the pitfalls of that particular legislation. However, next slide. This is what the reality is. The upper house is governed by political parties, which, if they are the dominant in the lower house and the upper house, and particularly Labor and the Greens with the teals, throw it in, legislation will get a wave through. The bicameral system is totally thwarted through this means. And you notice I have unions on the side. The people, particularly in the Labor Party, are members of the unions, and the unions are able to exert an undue influence on the members of Parliament, particularly the Labor members of Parliament. Now, the people of Australia didn't elect the unions. We elected representatives, and yet we've got this foreign body influencing our legislation. And of course, they influence it so that it benefits the unions. That's how we ended up with industry superannuation. And the Labor Party is a major beneficiary of industry superannuation through the unions, through union contributions. Next slide. Okay, the public service. Now, the heads of the public service departments achieve their positions by successfully playing corporate politics and ingratiating themselves to those that select and promote. They are team players. That's code for conformists and people who do not rock the boat. Further to this, the public service is heavily unionised, which means that an arm of the Labor Party is permanently entrenched in the vital division of the executive branch of the government. The public servants are the doers. They're the ones that let the tenders and the contracts and even physically get involved in the work, in providing a public service. It is therefore necessary that the governors have the right to select any person they wish from anywhere in the world to head each of the government departments, and this includes the deputy heads of the departments. Now, I told you before that the Governor-General and governors are nominally the heads of the public servants, of the federal public service and of the states. But the reality is they're just figureheads. The people who do the real meddling are ministers with portfolio and the premiers and the prime ministers. This is not good. Next slide. Okay, what's the problem? Well, the first problem is that government is not your friend. The second one is, would you trust any politician to run your business? Politicians are not competent to run multi-billion-dollar government departments. Politicians who are ministers are burdened with portfolios and therefore cannot give 100% of themselves to represent their constituents. When you vote for your local member federally, I bet you don't vote for them so that they can be the Minister for Education, Immigration, Finance, or whatever. You vote for them to look after your interests and concerns. Now, once they get up into Parliament, if they happen to be, one of the top gifted idiots of the clutch, then they will be given a portfolio. When I was in the army, we had a train driver as the Minister for Defence, Lance Barnard. So that is a major, major problem. We have amateurs running departments because they actually go in there and they take over the running. They try to run these departments in detail, and they're encouraged to do that, by the way, because if anything goes wrong in those departments, the minister is expected to resign, and they can't handle the disgrace of that. So they get involved intimately in the running of that department. The Prime Minister and Cabinet have too much power and say in the running of government departments. That's a point blank. The safety intended by the bicameral system is degraded by political parties, as I've mentioned, and also unions. Independents are not able to be elected to the Senate, the House of Review. And the reason for that is above and below the line voting. And I'm presently in the throes of preparing to mount a High Court challenge against above and below the line voting. By the way, I'm not the first person to do this. A Mr. Mackenzie back in 1984 tried to get the High Court to agree that above and below the line voting is unconstitutional, and he was unsuccessful in that. I'm going forward with different arguments. So basically, right at the core, there is no independence between any of these branches of government, and you've got people who are largely incompetent running the government. That is how we end up with Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese destroying the landscape by buying billions of dollars of solar panels and windmills using borrowed money and purchasing them from China. Yep, that's what idiots do. Next one. Okay, it is the same at state level. Your health. That is why they were able to oppress Australians under the pretext of the COVID emergency. Your property. That is why they can take your property off you on the pretext of climate change and Aboriginal treaty fairness. Unlike the federal government, state governments are not obliged to compensate a citizen for compulsory acquisition of their property. Most people don't know that. The federal government is, but the state governments are not. You should also be aware that at the state government level, politicians can change the constitution of the state without reference to the people. Okay, your future. This is what they have in store for you, your children, grandchildren, and their successors. So you better get involved and you'd better get interested, because this is what's coming down the track. Next. Okay, how do you fix it? And I'm going to have to get close to the thing. Okay, the first thing you do is you reform the Constitution at federal and state level. In fact, given that, thank you very much. I was about to put on my glasses. By the way, I've had my lens replaced in my eyes because of cataracts, and I recommend it to anybody. It was totally painless, and I now see almost as well as when I was 16 years of age. I only need glasses for really close-up work. Yeah, okay. Let's go. Let's put the old glasses on. We're going to reform the constitutions at federal and state level with an emphasis on protecting the rights of citizens and limiting the power of government, emphasising the government is the servant of the people. The people are not subjects of the government. Now, we started off as basically a military establishment and then colonies, and at all times we were subjects of the king. And we have now matured, I would suggest, such that we as Australians don't consider ourselves to be subjects of anybody. And we also should, as Australians, demand that the government is our servant. We are not servants of the government. We should ensure that there is independence between the three branches of the government by having the governors and the Governor-General, the Attorney-General, members of the House of Representatives and senators of the legislature elected by the people. In other words, we should be electing the governors and the governor-generals. And when you elect a governor or a governor-general, you should do so with a focus on whether that person is going to be competent to run the public servant. You do not want a politician like an ex-senator as your governor-general or your governor. You want somebody who is competent at running businesses. Okay, we've got to reform our electoral system such that it gives preference to independent candidates. If we do that, then we will undo the damage that's done to the House of Review. At present, as I tell you, with above and below the line voting, independent candidates cannot get elected. They simply cannot. 92% of people vote above the line, and that's party lines. Governors and governor-generals to appoint their lieutenant governors. governors and governor generals to appoint the heads and the deputy heads of the departments, selecting appointees from anywhere around the world. Now, that is deliberate, because if you put in people into the heads of the departments and the deputy head, the head of the department has to have a deputy head, because if you have a permanent public servant as a deputy head, that person is likely to white ant the appointee. So you've got to have the head and the deputy head appointed by the governor, basically drawing on the talent anywhere in the world. It doesn't have to be an Australian that sits there. If you've got somebody in Great Britain, Germany, America, wherever, and you think that they would be the best person to head that department or to be the deputy of that department because of their unique expertise, and you can inveigle them to come and work for Australia, you should do so. Okay, the Senate and legislative councils should have the right to question the appointments made by the government, governors and governor generals. But when they can't agree, there should be a plebiscite to allow the people to resolve the matter. That is the best way. You give the power back to the people. Just as for the ADF, no member of any government public service should belong to a union or a political party. They must be strictly apolitical. That in no way precludes them from having the right to vote at elections. They still compulsorily must vote at elections. So they do have as much a right as any other citizen of Australia. It's just like members of the Defence Force. They cannot belong to a union, and they should not belong to a political party. Now, they can belong to an association. There is a thing called the Defence Force Association, and there would be no problem with there being a public service association, but they cannot belong to unions. Next. Okay, Australia has been on a ruinous trajectory since the mid-1850s. This is because of the poor quality of Australia's elected representative and systemic problems with the government of this country. These things we can fix. Fixing them will take time and a coordinated effort. If fixed, the system will heal itself. Podcasts and speeches such as this, as well as other publicity events, are the first step on this challenging journey to reform Australian democracy for the better. Here endeth the presentation. Over to you, Blue.
Excellent stuff, Kevin. I'll just get you to, thank you. Readjust your camera. Very good.
I had to do that to read the screen. It wasn't clear. It was rather blurry.
Now, I've got a good question here from John the Boy. John the Boy says, what is the importance of independence between branches of government? I thought they were supposed to work together.
No. They work according to a set of rules. Now, interestingly, the Americans have got a problem, and it's called the executive order, presidential executive order. The whole point of the Governor General, who is effectively a president, but I've called him a Governor General or her, because culturally, I don't think there's any benefit in calling that person a president. But their role is to enact acts of parliament. They have a job to enact acts of parliament. And the last thing you want them to do is collude between themselves, because once they start doing that, it all becomes too powerful. And by keeping them separate, see, the Governor General is in charge of the army, and if you wanted to, if you were a bad Governor General, you could turn around and use the army to pull off a coup. Why doesn't that happen? Because you're dealing with army officers, one hopes, that are full of integrity and would simply say, no, the Constitution doesn't allow you to do that. That is an illegal order, and I cannot do it. So we all work by a series of orders. And the judiciary, for example, it is absolutely essential that the judiciary is separate from the legislature. Now, if you want to see how bad this gets, I really suggest to you, and maybe Stephen, I think I've already provided you with the links, but you ought to look at what's happened to Tommy Robinson, also known as Stephen Yaxley Lennon, in the United Kingdom. That is where the judiciary is thoroughly and totally corrupted. Now, the same goes, by the way, with the Trump prosecutions. They are all being done by political attorney generals. they're Democrat attorney generals who are using lawfare against a political opponent. And that is why you have to have them absolutely separate. You can't have them together. They have to be elected separately.
Now, John has been active in the chat. Thanks for watching, John. He's posted the original copy of the Commonwealth Constitution, which is that's fine, but we're looking towards the future and reforming what's in place. So whatever's come before and whatever you may think has happened along the way, we're looking towards the future. And a lot of this, yes, it's hypothetical. You're not going to be able to get all of this through, but we need to be having these conversations and this debate, and we need to get grassroots people talking about this stuff and creating a vision for where we want this country to go and where we want this country to be and how we want this country to be governed. It's no use talking about the past. We need to be talking about what we want going forward. Now, he's also...
If I could just interrupt there for a second, we did actually have a referendum that asked us whether we wanted to be a republic. And that was a nonsense referendum. I believe it was deliberately put out there to fail. And it was to get rid of the possibility of us electing the Governor-General. When they said, do you vote for Australia to become a republic? They didn't tell us what that would involve. Instead, the question should have been, would you agree to governors and governor-generals being elected by the people rather than being selected by the legislature? And you would do it in small steps. So the very first thing you would do is you would elect the Governor-General and the governors of the states. And the moment you do that, the psychology of those persons will change. They will immediately take the view, look, I'm popularly elected. I have the power. I have the legitimacy to exercise my muscles. And what's more, I can now go forward in front of TV cameras and so forth and give a state of the nation from where I see it. And I can be critical of the legislature. I can say, look, there are things that I can't agree with here. That, for example, this is stupid. There is no such thing as a climate crisis. That if we had a Governor-General popularly elected, and if that Governor-General was not political, that is to say, the Governor-General came from industry, that Governor-General quite likely could turn around and say, listen, this is a load of bullshit. Stop it now. I will not agree. I just veto any bill you send my way. I will not spend money on this. And that's the power of the Governor-General. The Governor-General can't enact things which the legislature has not agreed to, but the Governor-General can refuse to enact something that the legislature has passed as a law. He can refuse, or she can refuse, to sign it into law. And that's the power of the Governor-General, and that's why they have to be separate. If the legislature had said, oh, look, we're going to mandate that anybody in health work has to be injected, a Governor-General who had any sense would turn around and say, hold on a second, show me the data that justifies this. Show me where everybody's dying. And, oh, what? 82 years of age, average age of death for a male from COVID, and 86 for a female. You bastards have got to be joking. Get out of my office. That's how a Governor-General would work. But while you've got this incestuous situation, you will find that the Governor-General will do exactly what the legislature tells her to do, and the judiciary will do exactly what the legislature is telling them to do.
Is it fair to say that your view of what the Governor-General should be is essentially like the President of the United States?
Yes, but, we can learn a lot from that. For example, I've just touched on one, that a Governor-General should not be allowed to issue an executive order that is contrary to the wishes of Congress or contrary to the wishes of the legislature. The Governor-General's role is to enact the laws which are passed by the legislature, faithfully enact them.
Let's go into this, because that comes into separation of powers and what separation of powers should be. So we have the legislative, which makes the laws. That's the upper house and the lower house.
Upper and lower house,
House of Representatives and the Senate. in federal and in states, it's the legislative council and assembly, etc., etc. Then you have the executive that puts the laws into operation, and that's where you say that's where you're putting the governor general.
That's right.
The governor general will be, or governor. They will be the head of the executive, and then the judicial system, which interprets the laws and makes sure that they're lawful in regards to the constitution that's in place.
That's right.
Now, everyone assumes that those powers in Australia are separate. You're making the claim that the legislative and executive branches are not separate. They're actually,
and the judiciary is not. The judiciary is not separate either. He is a completely incestuous member of the cabinet.
Yep. Now, when I did some research into this, it looks like you're bang on the money. It actually, in black and white, says that there is no separation between the legislative and executive branches of government, and this is due to what they term as responsible government. By which, we live in a Westminster system, and there's accountability to the Parliament, and et cetera, et cetera. So you would completely do away with all of that. You completely separate.
See, the Westminster system evolves from when we had a real monarch, a person who could cut your head off if you look sideways. That person was truly independent, but that person realized that they couldn't govern unless they listened to all of the wealthy and influential in society. And that's how the House of Commons started and the House of Lords started. Now, the King appointed the Lords, so that was there as a House of Review. So you had the Commons, who were the wealthy and the elite. You couldn't get into the Commons. In fact, you weren't paid to be in the Commons, by the way, until about 1920. You had to be able to, sustain yourself, and you had to be a property owner. So, that to get into the Commons, you weren't all that common after all, but that's how it worked. But the moment that you set up a colony called, New South Wales, Queensland, et cetera, and then federated it and had a situation where the Governor General is not appointed by the monarch and working directly to the monarch without interference from the legislature, the Australian legislature, once that ceased, you lost it. We are heading towards tyranny. And believe me, with modern technology, it is going to be disastrous. Critical race theory, dysphoria, you name it, it's coming down the trail.
So
these people are idiots.
So currently, members around the country in different electorates get elected to Parliament. The government the party that has the majority forms government, and the leader of that party becomes the Prime Minister. And then the Prime Minister selects his cabinet and his ministry, which becomes the executive. You're saying...
No, not really. That doesn't work. It's not that clean cut. The Prime Minister is actually elected it depends on the party. The Prime Minister is elected by members of the cabinet. And by the way, the role of the Prime Minister is to be the chairman of the board. The newspapers have turned our Prime Minister into a quasi-president. But the Prime Minister should not have any say at all. For example, Hawke broke that mold when, without reference to anybody, he said, we're going to let 20,000 Chinese students stay in this country because of Tiananmen Square. He didn't go back to the cabinet and discuss it with them. The Prime Minister is supposed to be the chairman of the board, and all decisions coming out of cabinet are supposed to be by consensus. That those days are long over since Whitlam. The place has been ruined. We do not have proper prime ministers any longer. Now, by the way, the caucus, the unelected people in the Labor Party, decide who will be in the cabinet in the Labor Party. That's how it used to work. They may have reformed it since, I was a boy, but we used to talk about the faceless men in the caucus decided who would be ministers in a Labor government. And so, the Labor Party has long been infiltrated and dominated by communists and radical socialists, and they are fascists. They really are fascists.
So I've just put the link in the chat. If anyone wants to call in and ask Kevin a question or contribute to the discussion, I say this is always a dangerous part of the show because we don't know who's going to call in. But
welcome, Eddie. Look, I'd love to have an argument with somebody, truly, because these things need to be argued. People need to say, I don't agree with that, and here's my reason, and then I come back and so forth. Let's have the argument.
So, Kevin, would your view be that the governor general or president, whichever you want to call it, would be elected by the people, and then they
Yes,
would choose
definitely.
the executive. So the executive would, for people who might not understand what the executive is, that's your treasurer, foreign minister, minister for transport.
Your department. Look,
Blah, blah, blah.
the executive is your departments of government. That is your executive. Okay, and they're headed by a secretary and a deputy secretary. Each one of them is headed by a permanent senior public servant, secretaries. Now, I'm saying that the Governor General should appoint those two positions, the secretary and the deputy secretary. Those persons below can be career public servants. But those two people who sit right at the top of those departments should be decided by your chief executive, just as in a company.
And do they need to be members of parliament, or can they be anyone?
No. Oh, absolutely. You want to get people who are not political. That's why I stressed you do not want an ex-politician as your Governor General. You want somebody who is purely an executive, who gets things done, who knows how to get things done, and also a person who will be loyal to the legislature. In other words, the legislature passes a law and this person faithfully enacts the law unless that person says, no, this is a law with which I cannot agree, I am vetoing it. If I veto it 3 times, there is a double dissolution of Parliament and my position goes up for election as well. Everything it goes back to the people.
And say, for example, the Minister for Infrastructure, for example. So the elected Governor General would then select a minister for...
No, there are no ministers. It's
okay.
It's
You
like
would abolish all that.
Yeah, you see, the cabinet are actually the heads of your departments. They're the ministers. They're the ones that meet with the Governor General and discuss what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. The role then of the elected representatives is to represent their constituents. They can't, if they get a portfolio, they can't adequately do both jobs. Besides which, most of them are absolutely, totally, tossingly incompetent. So you wouldn't trust them with a candy store and you put them in charge of a multi-billion-dollar department. They shouldn't be there. Their sole role is to represent the interests and concerns of their constituents. Now, the way they find out whether the Governor General is actually doing what they are telling the Governor General to do, in other words, faithfully carrying out the role of Governor General, is that they have committees of inquiry. They have committees of inquiry. So certain of this legislature will be appointed to sit on these committees, and then they call in the heads of the department and even the Governor General and query the Governor General or the heads of the department. What are you doing about this? Why is this not working? Why are we spending all of this money and we're not getting the results? And so on and so on. The sole role of the legislature is to represent the people. Focus. End of story. And it's nuts. You would never do this in business. You don't give a person 2 distinctly onerous jobs and expect them to be done properly. Something's got to give. Something's going to fail. And in the case of Howard, he lost his seat, and so did Abbott, because they weren't performing their pastoral duties. They weren't looking after their constituents.
Okay, Kevin. So in this hypothetical system that hopefully we do get to one day, the legislative body, the lower house and the upper house, pass a health bill.
Yes.
Who implements that bill? So now it would be the Minister for Health and the Department of Health.
It's passed across to the President or to the Governor General. The Governor General will pass it to the Secretary in charge of the Department of Health and say, how are we going to handle this? Now, in the meantime, by the way, when they sit and have this cabinet discussion, there'll be the Minister for Finance there and the Minister for the Treasury. But I shouldn't have said minister, I mean the secretaries. And they might say to the Governor General, look, boss, actually, I don't know how we're going to afford this, because what the Parliament has now passed, it's going to cost this much money. Something else has got to give. So you're going to have to go back to the legislature and say, look, guys, we agreed on this budget and you've now passed this bill, which is not within this budget. I need you to pass another bill that will give me more money to carry out this function, or you tell me which of these things I'm going to drop off.
So no more ministers. Now we have secretaries.
Yeah, secretaries of the departments. You always had them.
Okay, and they're selected by the Governor General, and
so as to break the nexus in the public service, so that you don't have
they should be experts in that field.
Yeah, and what's more, they know they're only going to be there for 6 years, so they're not thinking, oh look, I've got a lifelong career here. I'll just sit back and be cozy and not do anything spectacular. When these people come in, they're going to say, look, this is broken. I can fix it. This is what we're going to do. And yes, there'll be an element of risk in this, and I could get fired, but that's my job. Whereas when you're dealing with a public servant, I've dealt with very senior public servants about open source software, and they looked at me and sort of said, look, I get paid to use IBM and Microsoft, and I get paid a lot of money. And you come in here and you tell me that, look, it'd be really good for the Australian people and Australia as a country if we could embrace more open source software. You got to be joking. I'm not going to do that. There's risk in that. I could lose my job. I'm here for the next 20 years if I just shut up and do as I'm told. And that's why we have the problems we have.
Okay, now I said it would be dangerous. We've got a caller that's called in. Nick Heath, welcome to Commanding the Narrative, mate.
You. Look, it's nice to see you both.
G'day, Nick.
Yeah, nice to see you. Look, I agree with a lot of things that you're saying. That's not a problem at all. What I do see is that a lot of the laws have been broken.
Yeah, look, I agree with you, Nick. And what's more
or less every law that we have in the country has been broken. Now, I take this, and that is the Commonwealth Constitution, right?
Yep.
All of them have been broken by every single one of these people.
Nick, let me ask you this. Now, you're saying all the laws have been broken. So essentially what you're saying is, well, stuff it. We can't do anything. Why are we talking about this? We're trying to come up with solutions and a pathway forward. And you're saying, all the laws have been broken in the past. What can we do?
I have gone into their court system and I've seen how they operate. And I've just gone, wow.
Well, Nick, if I could just leap in there for a moment, I'm really talking about how we could fix the problems you're talking about. I really believe that if we can achieve proper independence between the various branches, that is to say, if we have an independent judiciary that's not driven by politics,
that would be
then we can repair this.
That would be Chapter 3, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, that's all we can do. I mean, you can't go against the existing system.
Chapter 3 was meant to be independent, and they've more or less spat in our face.
Look, that's fine, Nick. But if look, at the end of the day, the power is with the people. They can try and do whatever they want. At the end of the day, if we don't have these discussions and we don't talk about these issues, then there's not going to be any movement. It's up to us as the collective group of people in this country, the Australian people. It's up to us to get involved, to get active, and have these discussions. And we can't just go, well, they're all corrupt. They've broken every law in the book, and it's not worth it. We're not going to get anywhere. Well, if we have that view, we're not going to get anywhere, mate. Nothing's going to change.
I agree with that too, but unless we can get the this out into the public, other than
Nick,
echo chamber.
My email is kevinl@kevinloughrey.com.au. Would you write to me, please? Because you're the sort of person that could get involved in this. I want to set up a foundation.
Well, I already am. I'm up against the Queensland government at the moment.
Well, write to me, and let's see where we can take this, okay? Because I need as many people as possible to get on board, and we can fix this. It could take 20 years. We could be dead and gone by the time it finally is rectified. But we have to start somewhere. It has to start somewhere. Otherwise, this country is just going to go down the toilet.
You're just going to have a communist, government that is going to.
That's what we want to stop. We want to stop that, and we can stop that.
That's what's going to happen if we continue down this road. That that everyone has got their blinkers on, and you go down the road and they just go, "Oh, that's so dear," It's got to the point where people are quite desperate. If you know what I'm saying, people are desperate.
That was the point I started off with, that this country is not on a good trajectory at this moment. And to me, I looked at it and said, okay, what's the cause of this? And the root causes are that we have low quality politicians in Parliament, and that the Parliament is so structured that these low quality politicians have far too much power. And we need to bring in a new team. We need to have somebody who will select the best people in the world to head our government departments and use our tax money in the best way possible to get the maximum effect from the money that the taxpayers are providing. And if we don't do that, then we'll just continue along the same old, same old. I actually believe, as a student of history,
we have this whole Commonwealth that in Australia where we're just giving away everything.
Yes, I don't disagree.
That is another problem. So
yeah, but you go back to why is this happening? And I'll sound like a stuck record, but the reason it's happening is that we have very poor politicians, and that's because our electoral system is broken, and that these politicians have far too much power. They should not be doing the thing. They shouldn't be put in the positions in which they are presently placed. They are not competent to be there, and they can't do their job properly.
They are coming from places where they're activists.
Yes, I agree.
They're full-on activists.
But the moment that you change the focus of a legislature to that of strictly representing the interests and concerns of their constituents, then you'll end up with a faithful legislature. At present, we don't have a faithful legislature. They also
don't care.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to make them care, mate. We're going to have to make them care. And do we have all the answers of how to make this happen? No, but
no one does. The
first step is to have a conversation.
Yep.
The
narrative, mate.
Yeah, we have to command the narrative. But look, Nick,
their narrative and their agenda. So, and that's what's occurring at the moment.
Yeah.
So,
look, mate, we appreciate you calling in. Thank you for contributing to the conversation. We'll have to move on, but thanks for watching. And hopefully
you've got my email address. Write to me.
Yeah,
okay.
Not a problem.
See ya.
Okay. Thanks, mate.
All right. Cheers.
Okay. Look, we've got some great people posting comments in the chat. I did have an agenda of all the issues that we wanted to get through tonight, but look, this is an open discussion, and it's good that people.
It's terrific. No,
it is terrific. Got a comment here from John the Boy. What is the practical way we can reform the government, as you've said? Is it through legislation or by referendum?
Only by referendum. And that's another thing that was it John that wrote that, by the way?
John the Boy.
Yeah, John, you cannot trust politicians as far as you could throw them. So you never, ever have anything that is an act of Parliament that relates to how the Parliament will operate, or how elections will be held, or for that matter, how referendums will be held. Now, a referendum at this moment can only be begun if an act of Parliament is passed, and that is wrong. We need citizen-initiated referenda, and we need what I call a permanently established constitutional convention that supervises the conduct of referenda in this country. You cannot allow politicians near anything that involves them, because they're thoroughly compromised. They'll only agree to those things which benefit them. They won't agree to stuff on the basis of, look, this would be good for the country.
Now, I've put the link in the chat again. If you want to be like Nick and call in, look, please do so, because we need more discussion. It can't just be Kevin and I up here talking about this. If you want to call in, if you want to have your say, now's the time. Tony's put a question in the chat. I'm almost reluctant to ask this because, again, she's talking about the past. We want to talk about the future and moving forward, but I love Tony, so I'll ask it anyway. Kevin, you mentioned that it changed with Whitlam. What was the impetus behind Kerr's decision? And she's talking about the Governor General at the time, Sir John Kerr, was it?
Yeah, Sir John Kerr. Yeah.
Sir John Kerr. Did the Lima
Declaration?
Declaration?
If you look behind there, you'll see that he signed my commission.
Oh, there you go.
Sir John Kerr signed my commission. There's a story attached to that, by the way. Hasluck wouldn't sign officers' commissions. And when Sir John Kerr took office, he said, what are all of these things? And his aide de camp said, oh, they're all the commissions that Hasluck wouldn't sign. He said, okay, I'm going to sign them all. So every day, Sir John Kerr sat down and spent something like an hour a day signing all of the commissions in order that all the officers who graduated from all of the military colleges got their commissions. So do not say a bad thing about Sir John Kerr.
Let's see what Tony has got to say.
Right.
Did the Lima Declaration, which by definition requires a continuality of bipartisan implementation, play a role in the dismissal? So
no,
essentially,
not at all.
Okay,
not at all. No, the dismissal, he had no room to go. Our constitution requires that if supply cannot be passed, that there has to be a double dissolution. And Fraser and the Liberal National Parties organised it that they would not pass supply. And they knew that if they could do this, if they could force a double dissolution, that they would enjoy a landslide, because Whitlam had so stuffed things up by that stage, especially Cairns and Junie Morosi and all of the other nonsense that was going on, Ros Kelly and so forth. The Libs and the Nats knew that they were going to win the election. So they forced a double dissolution. Kerr had absolutely no wriggle room. He had to do what he did. Now, where Whitlam stuffed up, and this shows you what a total arrogant tosser Whitlam was, when he stood out on those stairs and he said, God save the Governor General, God save the Queen, because nothing will save the Governor General. He was a total dipstick. He should have gone onto those stairs and said, look, I appointed Sir John, and he's one of the most honourable people I've ever met. And this scoundrel Fraser has put him in this most invidious position. You, the Australian people, will be able to tell Fraser where to jam it that the sun doesn't shine. Vote us back into power. Show the Liberals and the Nationals that they can't get away with this scandalous behaviour. Now, if he'd said that, he might have stood a little chance of getting back into power. Instead of that, he threatened the whole fabric of our democracy. What an idiot. What an arrogant, stupid man.
Well, we've got another caller call in. John, welcome to Commanding the Narrative, mate.
Hi, how you going, guys?
You have a question or a comment for Kevin?
I've just been listening, and it's interesting, like your suggestions and all, and I don't know much about how government works. I'm still learning about that, but
Good.
It just seems a little bit. I'm a little bit pessimistic, if you don't mind me being a little bit pessimistic about. I've only followed politics for maybe 5 years, and looking at, like, especially in our Christian community, that when we're looking to try and get through different legislation or getting awareness around different bills that are going through, it just seems so hard to get people to follow what's going on, let alone have this idea of having a referendum about reforming the government. I'm not saying.
But John, do you mind if I cut in? Because I mean, this goes back to the point before. If we have this defeatist attitude that we're not going to be able to achieve anything, and we can't wake people up, and we can't get people on side, then we might as well lay down and just say, "Hey, the people that are running the show win. They win, and they can ride off into the sunset. We're not going to fight anymore." And we just saw what happened in America. They've got a leader there who just got shot in the ear, and his first instinct was to get up, put his fist in the air, and say, "Fight, fight, fight." You don't give up. You don't lay down. You don't say, "No, it's not worth it." What's the point? They've done all these horrible things in the past. We can't change the future. We are the majority. We have the power. John, you have the power. You can influence people, and you can do things to change this country. So if we just have this defeatist attitude, we're going to get nowhere.
Yeah, I'm not saying like that we lie down and do nothing, but I don't think we should be looking on such the macro scales. We should be looking at the micro scale more, where we can make more influence in our local community. Like I'm like this idea of reforming government is a great idea, but I think we've got a better chance at reforming local governments than we do at reforming the government itself. I know you don't agree, but
if I can leap in there, John. Firstly, you don't have a better chance of reforming local government. You have a better chance of making a difference at local government. But the local government is actually the administrative arm of the state, and the state is not democratic. The states are basically run by a constitution which was developed by two governors, and William Wentworth and John MacArthur. And these state constitutions are basically authoritarian constitutions that pay no regard to the rights of the citizens. Your local government is the administrative arm of the state government. We actually had a referendum where we were asked, did we want local governments to be included into the Constitution? And the Australian people voted against that. But look, coming back to, you said something that was quite profound right at the beginning, and that is you don't know much about government. Well, here's your chance. If you go and look at what I have written, and it's odd, there's one thing on my website right at this moment, which is called electoral reform. Go to my website, go to ideas and opinions, and then you'll find that there's, now I think we've just gone directly to it, have we? Could you go back, please? If you could, please, Steve, just go right back to the beginning of the webpage. Now, you'll see down the third one from the bottom is ideas and opinions. Click on that. And then there's a whole list of things there, interesting things. And then the third one from the bottom there is electoral reform. So you click on that and have a read of that. Now, as you're reading that, ask yourself over and over again, is this right? Every paragraph, read the paragraph and say, does this make sense, or do I disagree with Kevin? If you disagree with me, you've got my email address. I would love to hear from you. I would love to debate this. Okay? But if you read that, you will come to understand why our electoral system is suboptimal at this moment. It is suboptimal. It works, but it's very bad because it discriminates against independent candidates. And I do believe we need a lot more independent candidates because there are quite a number of negatives with respect to political parties. A person in a strong political party cannot faithfully represent the interests and concerns of their electorate. Party policies come before the people they're supposed to represent. So the next thing about a political party is when they hold their pre-selections, often people are, how can you put it, pre-selected, not on the basis that they are the best person for the job, but because they know somebody who is influential within the party, or they've given long and loyal service to the party, and therefore the party wants to reward them by giving them what is effectively a sinecure in Parliament. That often happens in the National Party with the state directors. And once they've been a state director, they get a job either in the Australian Senate or in the upper house of the New South Wales Parliament in the case of the New South Wales Nationals. It happens in every other party too. I just picked out the Nationals because I was a senior member in the National Party. So you need to look at that Now, by the time you've chewed through that, I will have put these other presentations I've done up into that sort of web space, and you could look at that too, and look at each one of those slides and say, look, do I agree with this guy, or do I disagree? If you disagree, I want to hear it from you. If you think you can make it better, you don't even have to disagree. You might say, oh, Kev, look, you've actually forgotten something here. You didn't cover this point. This is really important. Do you understand what I mean? And so you can help me build this. I want to start a foundation where I get everybody in Australia, if I could, involved in it. It's only then that we will have a referendum, and we do this step by step. You cannot do this overnight. You've got to do it one little step at a time, because you might make a misstep. You might make a mistake, in which case there's nothing wrong with saying, look, that didn't work out. Let's go back to whatever, or let's change it accordingly. Okay, this is really exciting, mate. This is about us saving our country and making our country better, and ensuring that our children, our grandchildren, and their successors will have a prosperous and happy future. That's what this is about. If we continue on the present road we are on, we will not. This country's $1.3 trillion in debt. The people who now own that debt could come in and buy out the best farmland and the most valuable assets in our country, and we could not stop them. We would have to honor the debt. That's how desperate it's become. And we have absolutely nothing to show for that 1.3 trillion. It would be different if we had developed a system where we channeled water from the eastern seaboard across to the west, and now we had 3 times more farmland than we had before, but we have absolutely nothing for the $1.3 trillion. Something, I mean, if you were in business with some guy and he spent $1 million and turned around and said, oh, look, I just spent $1 million, but no, we haven't actually got anything for spending $1 million. How would you feel about that business partner? Yeah, I think you'd be pretty edgy about it, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Well, that's what these people have done to us. And it's not just the Labor Party. The Libs did this as well, and the National Party, and the Greens. They've all been into it. It was Howard who signed us up to the Kyoto Agreement. It was Howard who banned nuclear technology in this country. It was Whitlam who signed us up to the Lima Agreement, which denuded the manufacturing in this country. It was, I don't know, I have to think who it was, whether it was Hawke or whatever, but somebody signed us up to a United Nations agreement where we have lost control of our national parks. They can say, oh, that's a national heritage, a World Heritage site, and Australians can't do what they want with it. We have been absolutely shafted by every one of our major political parties since Menzies. Menzies was truly the last real Liberal. We have been dudded by these people, and we really need to take a long, hard look at it as to how we can improve the quality of our elected representatives. And having done that, something like a racing car driver, the first thing we've got to do is ensure that we get the best racing car drivers running in our competition, representing us. And then we've got to build the best racing car, because even if we improved the parliamentarians, got a higher quality parliamentarian into Parliament, they're still going to be trying to race in a jalopy. We've got to fix up our Parliament, fix up our governmental structure so that these exceptional people can do exceptional things.
Now, Kevin, sorry to cut in, John, because we've got another caller waiting. So, John, we're going to have to let you go. But
John, you've got my email address.
Yeah. Okay.
Before I let you go, John, you seem like a young fella. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 18. I'll turn 19 next month.
That's fantastic, mate. Good on you for being involved, and good on you for watching this and trying to learn. I see down the bottom there you've got the title Young Conservatives for Christ, and you're the Victorian coordinator. You want to just tell everyone quickly what the Young Conservatives of Christ are?
Yeah, so it's just a new movement that was formed last year by our National Director, Jeremiah Ambrose. It was just looking and seeing that young Christians aren't really associated with politics. They don't know what's going on. Like if I went to an auditorium full of 100 kids, asked them if they knew the digital ID bill passed Parliament a few weeks ago, I'm sure 0 hands would go up. There's no one that knew that went through. No, and there's because of there's no pushback. So our main movement is just to bring back conservative ideals that were once Liberal Party's ideals back into politics. That would get young Christians involved to be part of the political process again.
Fantastic, mate. That's exactly what you need to do. So
Good on you,
great
John.
work. Please email Kevin, but also email me as well. I'm interested to know more about what you guys are doing down there. And if we can have you guys back, maybe we can interview you and the head of the Young Conservatives for Christ and get your name out there and get the word out there and try and attract more people to what you're doing. So thanks for calling in, mate.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks
Thank you,
for talking
John.
with me.
We'll let you go, John, and we'll bring on Tobias. Welcome to Commanding the Narrative, mate.
Good day. Thanks for letting me join in. I heard some good suggestions with the Governor General and with making new laws, with having representatives of the people in Parliament. This only works in my understanding if we have our accountability. So if they don't make accountable for the decisions what they're making or the lack of decisions, then we have the same problem what we have now. How can we enforce the accountability?
Comes from whether they get elected or not, Tobias. That's where the accountability comes in.
So then they serve 3 years. So they can come in for a period of 3, 4, or 2 years, whatever the time is. And in this time, they can do whatever they want because they don't have accountability.
No, they can't. You see, the nature that what would you call it? The nature of human beings is that even when they belong to the same party, they will not agree with each other. There will be debate. So it's not as if one person can come into a parliament and change everything, though we do have that problem right at this moment if that person is the Prime Minister. And you're right there that there should be some accountability. I'm actually moving towards trying to prosecute people for murder, manslaughter, official malfeasance, and reckless grievous bodily harm in company with regard to the COVID business. But that's another story. There will be accountability if somebody does something which is outside of the purview of immunity. But the people just in our system, one person cannot come in and change everything. So you have to drop that idea. But you can have a group of people like the Greens and Labor who decide that they're going to stop all fossil fuels and that they're going to dot the landscape with windmills and they're going to put in all of these solar panels. And the end result is that they destroy our energy grid and cause us to be paying 40 plus cents a kilowatt hour for our electricity. But the fact of the matter is we can't do anything about them. We can't put them in prison. We just have to vote them out of office and put in people who are responsible.
There you see, there's already a problem. We have parties in Parliament.
Yes.
Yes. How do we get rid of parties? Because as we recently saw with from Anthony Albanese, who excluded her own senator from Parliament or from the party for crossing the bench. Parties.
Stephen, when I'm talking, good, yeah, because there's a time delay there, Tobias. You're like about 3/4 of a second. And then I'm sort of coming up and it's all getting messed up. But look, you can't get rid of political parties. Political parties are once again human nature. People who have the same political beliefs, have the same sort of culture, they want to flock together into what are called parties. What you can do is you can limit the influence of parties. And that's what I'm talking about with this constitutional reform. There are many things that discriminate against an independent. If you got rid of those roadblocks, we would have a lot more independence in Parliament. And once you've done that, you will achieve, in fact, a diminution of the influence that political parties can bring to bear. Go and have a look at my website, which Stephen has shown you. Look at electoral reform. You've got my email address. If you want to write to me, please do. That's you won't get rid of political parties, but you can certainly make it easier for independents to get into Parliament. And really, we need a lot of independents. We don't need political parties. And especially if we were to go to this model, which I'm talking about, where people who are elected to Parliament have one duty, and that is to their constituents. They don't have any role to play in the executive arm of government.
Tobias, unfortunately, we're getting a lot of feedback at your end, so we're going to have to let you go, but you've sparked some questions. We'll talk about accountability and we'll talk about the political parties as we go ahead. So thank you very much for calling in, mate. It looks like you're camping or something. You're in your tent or something there, or maybe you're in bed or something. But look, mate, thanks for calling in, and please call in next time. We'll let you go.
Tobias.
Thanks, Tobias. Kevin, great points there. He actually raised accountability, and I wanted to talk about this. There's a couple issues that he talked about. I want to talk about reforming the Senate because I think that's important. But before we get there, we've got two. I recently wrote an article. It was published in the Spectator. And is largely inspired by my conversations with you. If you don't have access to the Spectator, you can head to commandingthenarrative.com and find this article, More Power to the People, and read this article. Now, I bring up your idea of plebiscites for treaties, which we can maybe touch on a little bit later. But there's two issues: citizen-initiated referenda and recall elections. Now, the first one, citizen-initiated referenda, would enable people, provided that there's enough support by the public, to be able to repeal a legislation or introduce legislation. So that's one part. Recall elections. Now, this is implemented in California. I'm not a huge fan of this, but look, this is all about sparking debate and discussing these issues. Tobias said, where's the accountability if politicians get elected and don't do what they say? Well, a recall election can recall them before their term finishes. So do you want to have a couple comments about recall elections first, and then we can talk about citizen-initiated referenda?
Well, they're both very closely related. And the first thing I'd like to differentiate is that a referendum doesn't change legislation. What a referendum does is it says, for example, we should get rid of Section 51, subsection 26, which you've heard me talk about before. It is a section in our Constitution that confers upon the Commonwealth the right to make laws on the basis of your race. So if we were to have a referendum and we say, look, we want that particular clause in our Constitution, it's a section really, and we want that removed, rescinded, and in its place, we want a section in our Constitution that says no government at any level within the Commonwealth may make laws, or in fact, no government or government-funded entity may make laws or construct regulations which discriminate on the basis of race, gender, or ancestral heritage. Now, that goes into your Constitution, and the politicians can't change it. The only way they can change it is by inveigling another referendum. But meanwhile, Kevin,
you're saying citizen-initiated referenda would only be a referendum to change the Constitution. Hey, mate.
Exactly. That's the whole point.
But we're the people. We have the power. If we want to bring in,
you're coming to the next thing, which is recall. That's the function of a recall.
No, but if we want to have a mechanism in place, let's say we wanted to repeal the digital ID bill, and you might say, well, that's not part of the Constitution, so a referendum wouldn't be able to.
No. What you can do? No. You believe me, that's not the way you go. What you do is you hold a referendum and you insert into your Constitution a prohibition against digital ID. That's the only way to do it. Because if you leave it as legislation, the next lot of politicians that come in will do their best to work their way around it. But if you put it into your Constitution, the politicians can't change it. But you were onto something else, which is recall. So imagine that we're really seriously ticked off with, for example, the government entering into the WHO treaty. And we say, right, that's it. We're going to have a recall. and we get enough signatures together where we say, right, we want an election on this basis. We are not happy with this. We feel you have betrayed us. We want an election. Now, the matter then goes to the people, and if the people vote for a new government, that new government says, well, obviously this legislation's no good, we're going to repeal it. Because the whole point of us being elected was that we would repeal this legislation. So that's how you get legislation repealed. You do it by recall or the threat of a recall. But if you want to make sure that politicians can't dud you, you've got to put it into your constitution. Now, an example of what you're talking about, let's talk about a treaty. You have in your constitution a clause which says before the government can commit the Australian people to anything by way of a treaty, there must be a plebiscite. And that's how you do it. And then if the people say, yeah, look, we're happy to enter into this treaty, it could be a trade treaty, might be a defence treaty. But if the people are prepared to do it, then you enter into the treaty. Because when they enter into a treaty, they're obligating every one of us. They're not just obligating their government, they're obligating the Australian populace. Another one is that you can't destroy a public asset or, for that matter, sell off a public asset if it has a value greater than some percentage, nominal percentage of the GDP. That then stops privatisation. It stops idiots like Andrews blowing up $2 billion worth of Hazelwood Power Station, which the bastard did, or those idiots in South Australia that destroyed power stations. So, that's how you do it. You put in a caveat in your constitution, which then stops them from doing anything. Well, the people have said legislation should be signed. That's not practical. The legislation could be signed off by the Governor-General. That's the whole idea of electing a Governor-General.
Kevin, I completely support the plebiscites for treaties. I think it's a fantastic idea, but to play devil's advocate, this here is the list of treaties that Australia has signed since 1856. So look, a lot of these are amendments. So I'm assuming that you wouldn't have plebiscites for the amendments, but are you saying that we should have plebiscites for every single one of these treaties? Like, this is the amount of treaties over time that Australia has signed. So are we having plebiscites for every single treaty that comes through, or are they just the major treaties? And follow-up question, do we still have compulsory voting, or is this a situation where if you want to vote on it, you can. If you don't, you can opt out?
No, I think you have compulsory voting for the reasons I've laid out in that essay. It is the best system. It means that you get full participation of your populace. What you've got to do is get rid of the donkey voter. The thing that with regard to these treaties, if you were to go through those treaties, I bet you anything you like, at least 2/3 of them have lapsed, that they've been overtaken by something else. But the point you raise is actually a good one. If in the practical implementation of this, we find, look, there's just too many treaties, it's just not practical, then you put it to some sort of working party, which has been elected by the people. You say, look, okay, work your way through this and come back to us with some way in which we can have some say in this, have a better control of it. Because we do not trust politicians. We don't want them committing us as a country to things that we don't agree with or which would later become a liability to us.
Well, the argument that I made was that if you were to have this in place, where you would have to have a plebiscite for treaties, governments may be more reluctant to enter into treaties that they know will be unpopular.
We should hope. We should hope.
You would hope.
Yeah.
Because, look, treaties take a long time to negotiate between, whether it be between another country or multinational groups or whatever it might be. So it's almost like a handbrake or a safeguard mechanism.
Yeah.
So we might be having to go and do a lot of plebiscites, but that's part of living in society. If people do need to get more active in the political process, and people might be going, oh, I hate voting every 3 years, and I hate voting every 4 years in state elections, and I can't even be bothered voting in local government. elections. But unfortunately, that's part of living in a society. It's part of living in this country. It's part of being involved in the political process. And if you have to be in the ballot box every few months or whatever, that's a consequence of living in a great country like ours.
Yep. So what we could say at this juncture is that in principle, we think this is a good idea. In practicality, it may not be practical. Let's look into it further. Do you know what I mean? And somebody just said a plebiscite would reduce the amount of treaties, which are mostly unnecessary anyway, and that could well be the case.
Yeah, that's Tony. Good on you, Tony.
Yeah. But just coming back to your first point with regard, recall is where you can affect legislation directly. A referendum is aimed at changing your constitution. And what you do there is you put in place prohibitions that prevent your politicians from doing things which would cause you, the people, harm.
Okay, let's move to the Senate. I know this is going long tonight, but do you mind going a little bit longer, Kevin?
No, not at all. No, you're in charge.
So this one's an Adam Zara special. Adam has put forward the view that when it comes to the Senate, it's meant to be the House of Review. Therefore, there should be no political parties. All people within the Senate, elected to the Senate, should be independents. How do you feel about that? And would it work?
Well, once upon a lifetime ago, the people who were appointed to the House of Lords were all appointed by what was effectively the king, the Governor General, the monarch. And I think that wasn't such a bad system, because one of the failures of a democracy is it becomes mob rule. The people start voting money for themselves. And also you can end up with a group of people who feel that they're entitled to other person's property. I haven't got it, you have, I want it, and I'm not happy to work for it. So, look, I think what Adam is saying has some merit. Whether it's practical or not is another thing. For example, a person could become a member of a party, and then when they want to run for the Senate, they leave the party. But in essence, they're still, a Labor or a Liberal or a National. It really is a case
as you
of,
said,
as I'm talking, I actually agree with Adam. I'm starting to talk myself into it, because you see, if they've left the party, they can't get kicked out of the party if they go against the party, can they? They don't suffer that opprobrium, that shame, that embarrassment. So look, if you want to be, just as if you want to be elected to the Australian Parliament, you cannot hold another nationality. If you want to be elected to the Senate, you must surrender your membership of any political party. And that makes it much easier for you to go against it. The voters know what you stand for, don't they? I mean, if you've been a member of the Labor Party for the whole of your life and you've been an elected representative or something, they would know what you think and where your values lie when they vote for you. So there's no hiding that. I mean, anybody who looks at me would tell you that I'm a libertarian. I actually want, I would prefer to have no government at all, but I know that's not practical. There has to be government, otherwise you have chaos. But my wish is that government stays out of my life to the maximum extent possible. A lot of the stuff we have at this time, like registrations and things like that, they're totally unnecessary. Like, I had to build a house here. And it was only by sheer blind luck that my development application dates back to 2004, before they brought in basics. But now anybody who's building a house has to have some idiot come through and tell you that it's, insulated to some level. It's got nothing to do with the government. If I want to live in a house that's got a tin shed, tin roof and no ceilings, that's my business. It just goes on and on and on.
Just to finish up on Adam's idea of independence being in the Senate, look, I think it's human nature to form cliques and factions, and that's going to happen naturally. But I mean, we see that already. I mean, even though there's parties in the Senate, you'll see bilateral agreements, there's this push by Senator Alex Antic to repeal the digital ID bill, and he's going into a coalition with Malcolm Roberts of One Nation and Ralph Babette of UAP. I mean, if they were all independents, they would all be working together as well. So that would still happen, but they're not bound together in lockstep. I mean, if they wanted to move away from that grip on a particular issue, they could. I mean,
now look at all the Labor senators and tell me that they would cooperate if the Labor Party said, no, we want this. See, if they're not a member of the Labor Party, if they've left the Labor Party, then the Labor Party can't kick them out.
Yeah.
They can't be shamed. They can't be embarrassed. And when they go along to a cocktail party with their mates would say, oh, here comes this, here comes this ringer, yada, and they'd make a bit of fun about it, but it'd still be acceptable. But if he was a member of the Labor Party and he went against what Albanese and the caucus told him to do or her to do, they'd chuck that person out. So actually, Adam, you've talked me into it. When I started speaking, I was thinking, no, that's not really practical, but it is practical. When I was running as an independent, I had to suspend my membership of 2 political parties. Yeah. You're allowed to belong to more than one political party in this country, by the way. You're not allowed to run as 2 political parties in an election. But when I ran as an independent, I felt it was right and proper that I should suspend, cancel my membership in the various political parties with which I was involved. And I already, regardless of which political party I'm in, I've made this very clear to people I'm associated with. My very first obligation is to faithfully represent the interests and concerns of the people who put me into that position. It's not to any party.
Look, we are getting to the end. I've got a couple more issues. Let's maybe do some rapid fire because some of these issues we have touched on before, and I encourage people to go back to the ex-candidates episode 103 where we covered a lot of these issues already. But if we are going to do this reform and we're going to basically overhaul the whole system and bring in what we want, first question is, do we need more states?
Yeah, look, we've had this before. They reckon government works best when it's closest to the people it serves. I keep on saying the government's there to serve you. And it would not hurt, given the size of the state of Queensland, Western Australia, all of our states except for Victoria and Tasmania, maybe even Victoria, you could divide it in half or 3 places. But yeah, I do believe we need more states. And I think it would be very good for the country if we had more states. I go to America and I am gobsmacked that I can move to the middle of America and it's not all that fertile, but there are millions of people there. And that's because they had separate states and each one of those states looked after the people who were in that area. Yep. It's very hard for a person up in Cookstown to get anything done down in Brisbane.
Yeah. Tobias has got a comment here. Tobias says, what about the voting system? Look, Tobias, that's a completely separate podcast, and we will be doing a follow-up on that. Yep. And if you want to head to Kevin's website, he's got the whole page there on election reform. So head to kevinloughrey.com.au and search for, what were the steps again? Ideas and opinions, and then election reform.
Ideas and opinions, electoral reform. Yeah.
Okay, the next one is... look, this is one of mine. Should local and state governments be abolished and replaced by regional governments?
Well, we've dealt with that. And once again, I go and have a look at the Americans, and I'm amazed at how the Americans work. They have their local councils actually vote for their mayor and they vote for their sheriff. And I was surprised to find out that the duty of the sheriff is to protect the citizens from external law. Beat that one. So if, for example, state police turn up and they're doing something wrong, the local sheriff will step in and protect you.
Now, a lot of people out there are aware that we have a federal constitution. Now, some people may not be aware. they're the ones we need to worry about. But even more people might not be aware that we have state constitutions, and they're a real problem. And they might not be aware, even further, is that these state constitutions do not require referendums to be changed. They can be changed by acts of parliament. Yes. What are your views? I know you've expressed views on the state
I think
constitution.
it's abhorrent. It's an abhorrent principle. In fact, the Parliament should have nothing to do with the Constitution. The Constitution should be developed by a constitutional assembly or convention that is elected people who were elected by the populace for that purpose. And you do not let politicians anywhere near a constitution, just like you shouldn't allow them anywhere near a voting system. They're totally compromised.
Okay, next thing, the bureaucracy. Now, this is a big one, and probably a podcast in itself as well. Should it be reduced?
Yes. And if you did what I'm talking about and you got the best persons in the world to head those government departments, the directors at state level and the secretaries at the federal level, they would cut down the departments. They would say, okay, what are we producing here? Where's the money going? How can I do things better with less? So yes, you would find dramatic savings if you got high quality people into the public service, heading the public service.
What about fixed terms for bureaucrats, especially the top bureaucrats?
Yeah, but the bureaucrat's term is as long as the Governor General's. The Governor General brings in the top bureaucrats, and at the end of the Governor General's term, they're gone.
Yeah, that's a
and
good
the
one.
Governor General, by the way, at any time can say, I no longer have confidence in you, you've got to go.
Yep.
And that would be in the contract. There would be a severance clause which says, look, if you have worked for 9 months here, then you'll be paid a year's wages or something. They would be generous because you're dealing with people who are of considerable ability. But it is quite possible that the governor will find somebody that they don't have any confidence in and they want them gone. They made a mistake in the recruitment. And when they do that, there's got to be compensation paid to that person because it was the governor and the recruiting agency that made the mistake. That's how I feel about it.
Okay. What about, so I think this was one of Donald Trump's initiatives when he came as president, but it's been replicated in other places as well. If the government is to introduce legislation or restriction or requirement or whatever, then to introduce one piece, then another one or two other pieces of legislation need to be repealed. Now, I see some dangers in that because you could be introducing bad legislation, repealing good legislation. How do you feel about that?
Look, you've got to trust your legislature. You elected them, you put them there. And I'm all for getting rid of laws. You will find, in fact, in our system especially, that we invent a law which is easily covered by a general law. And by the way, general laws are far, far better than our specific laws. E.g., if you have a law that says you will not steal, that's it. But then what they do is they say, oh, no, we want a law that says you can't steal a car. And if you steal a car, we want a mandatory sentence of blah, blah, blah. That's when everything goes totally wrong. You've got to have general laws, not specific laws, not laws by prescription, it's called.
Tobias has made a comment. Laws. He says, this is too much authority for one person, and in reference to what you're speaking about with the Governor General, but maybe we should make it clear. You're not saying that the Governor General will be able to create any law at all.
No.
Laws still get passed and by the Parliament.
The Governor General has to follow what the legislature tells the Governor General to do by law, by the passage of laws, which get turned into regulations. Now, if the Governor General is aberrant, doesn't do with what they're supposed to do, the legislature, that is the lower house and the upper house, can impeach the Governor General, in which case there's a new election and the people will decide.
Okay. What about, I'm down to the last two now, so we're almost done. The court system. Now, in the Constitution, it says you're meant to have trial by jury. Now, There's some courts in Australia where that's no longer the case. There are no juries at all.
That's got to change. That is, especially in the family court, it's abhorrent, absolutely, totally abhorrent. When you're talking about taking children off one parent and giving them to another, it's not on. there's got to be a jury. You cannot leave it to a judge. The things that go on in family court would make you weep. And Pauline Hanson has been very vocal about this, and I agree with everything she's saying. It is absolutely wrong.
Do you feel that the family court is constitutional?
No, I don't. I think it's certainly not in the spirit of the Constitution. When we started our Constitution, we said that everybody is entitled to a trial by jury if there is a custodial sentence involved. And that's how it should be. You know, in Britain, they can lock you up for 6 months without a jury trial. You just have a completely corrupt judge decide that they're going to throw you in jail for 6 months. And off you go. You can be completely innocent, as was Stephen Yaxley Lennon. And he's proven that. If you go and look at his video, which is called Silenced, and by the way, he's facing 2 years jail because that video was made and it was published by somebody other than him. Now, that is wrong too. When a justice system cannot stand scrutiny, that justice system is bereft of justice and utterly corrupt. And really, that judge, by the way, in Germany, a judge can go to jail, and one has recently. I reckon that judge that heard Tommy Robinson, aka Stephen Yaxley Lennon's defamation case, should go to jail, and for a very long time. That person is, a piece of human detritus, the worst of the worst.
Last one, mate. Bill of Rights.
Yeah, look, the word Bill of Rights has the connotation that it's a separate document. If you're talking about incorporating into our Constitution citizens' rights, and you want to call that part of the Constitution the Bill of Rights, I'm all for it, totally for it. It's got to be part of your Constitution. It cannot be a separate document.
Which is the case in America, right? So their first 6 amendments to the American Constitution, that's
I think they've got 14, haven't they? 14.
No, I think let me look it up. I think maybe it started.
You might be right that 6 of them pertain to human rights, citizens' rights. But I think you'll find that there's something in the order of 14 amendments.
I'm relying on. Okay, it's the first
Mr. Google.
10.
Mr. Google wouldn't lie about that.
It's the first 10 amendments. It says here.
There you go.
Yep.
Just ask how many amendments are. Oh no, that wouldn't. Oh yeah, maybe they call them all amendments. How many amendments are there in the U.S. Constitution?
That's a separate. How many?
I think it's 14. That number comes to my mind. But yes, I'm to answer your question, and I think you agree with me on this, that we definitely need a Bill of Rights, and I believe the proper place for that Bill of Rights is in the Constitution.
I don't necessarily agree. There's 27.
Okay.
There's 27 amendments in the Constitution, and the first 10 are the Bill of Rights. Obviously, the first is the the freedom of speech and the press and the right to assemble, and Second Amendment is the right to bear arms, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have discussed the Bill of Rights with multiple people on this show. Some that are for the Bill of Rights, some that are against the Bill of Rights. And look, it's just another thing that that can be interpreted by the High Court. Just because you've got a line down on a piece of paper doesn't necessarily mean that you're protected. So, look,
let's dwell on that for a moment, shall we? The High Court has opined that above and below the line voting is not against the Constitution. So the remedy for that is 2 possibilities. One is that I go back to the High Court with a different argument, which is what I've got, and I'm able to convince one of the justices of the High Court, or even the bench, en banc, that my argument is cogent, and they will say, yes, you're quite right. Above and below the line voting is unconstitutional. It must stop. If I don't succeed in that, and I'm doing this deliberately, if I don't succeed in that, I'm hoping that it will draw the attention of the Australian public to this, and that we will then put pressure on our elected representatives to have a referendum that will prohibit above and below the line voting, because there are a number of other things that I want fixed up in the Electoral Act of 1918, which is where it all comes from. Okay, the Electoral Act of 1918 is now 475 pages or thereabouts. And in there, it just defines above and below the line voting, which was introduced, I believe, in 1984. So that's how you go about it. And that's how it should be.
Nick says he's talking about the 1688 Bill of Rights, which is from the UK. I understand, as I understand it. He says the High Court has said that the 1688 Bill of Rights is valid, and in a previous comment, he said it's already part of our Constitution.
No, it's not, and that's just not true. Absolutely not true. Otherwise, the Racial Discrimination Act, and I forget which one it is it something C, 17C or whatever? What's the 18C? The one that stops racial vilification. If that were true, we would have free speech and I could racially vilify anybody I like. But I can't. I would face a jail sentence in this country if I say something which somebody else believes is racist. So that's a load of hooey. See, there are people who come out with a lot of BS and say, oh, but we already got this. No, we haven't. If it's in our Constitution, we have it. But if you're going to try and turn around and convince a High Court justice that a Bill of Rights of 1688 still applies to us, that justice could turn around and say, no, it doesn't. It's not in our Constitution, and I don't agree. But if it's in our Constitution in black and white, the justice can't. And if they do, you can impeach them. 72C of the Constitution, the Senate can say, well, you have not upheld the Constitution, and that was your job. You've seen that joke where they said, I only gave you one job and you stuffed it up. And that's the situation. Now, if it's in black and white in our Constitution, if it says that government will not abridge a person's speech except for the purposes that they cannot incite violence, acts of violence, then that's it, black and white. But when you go off on these fluffy bloody expeditions telling me that I've got something from ancient England that protects me, that's a load of hooey, because the Parliament will pass an act here that will override it. They cannot override our Constitution.
Well said, mate.
I really feel very strongly about this because there are just so many people that rave on about things which can get us into a lot of trouble. It's almost like the guy, look, is that gun loaded? No, I think it's unloaded. Is that minefield safe to walk over? Oh, I think we cleared it. That's the sort of nonsense that you're dealing with. If it's in our Constitution and it says you can't do it, then the government can't pass an act of Parliament to change it, to go against it.
I think a lot of people,
and to do so is an act of treason.
I think a lot of people assume that our Constitution is like the American Constitution, where it has set you're free to do this, you're free to do that, you're free to do this. Our Constitution is mainly just like an instruction manual for government. It doesn't really have too many protections in there.
Right on the money. It was developed by 5 authoritarians. That's really where it all comes from. We were subjects of the king. We weren't born with inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You needed a war of independence to sort that little argument out. That's why the Americans are so different to us, and I actually like the way they are. I reckon we should copy a lot of the good things and drop all the bad stuff. We can learn a lot from the Americans, and one of them is that we are free. We were born free, and we're subjects to nobody. The government is there to serve us. We're not subjects of the government. I really feel strongly about that.
The biggest problem with all of this, whether it be here in Australia or in the UK or wherever, we've evolved through authoritarian regimes or monarchies or whatever, and we've slowly been getting little bits of freedom along the way, but it hasn't started off at a truly fundamental, you're a sovereign citizen type, or we the people, blah, blah, blah. America did to a large degree, and that's why that's why they say Americans the beacon of light, and it's the top of the hill and blah blah blah.
It does have its problems, as you know. It does have its problems.
Look, I think this country works a lot better than the US in a lot of ways. You go to America and I think we are so fortunate to live here in this country, but that doesn't mean that we're perfect. And we should be taking good pieces from different countries and then coming up with our own ideas as well, and stepping out of what we already have here. Yes, we've got a system of government that is very good compared to most of the countries in the world. That is true. We are very lucky to live here. We are very lucky to be protected in a lot of ways, but we can improve it. We can make it better. There are deficiencies that you've pointed out, and we need to be having these discussions to move the population, the government, our institutions, everything into the direction of giving people more freedom, more protection, and reducing government. Because at the moment, we're going in the wrong direction.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. And we've been doing this since 1850 onwards. We've been heading in the wrong direction.
All right, mate.
By little bit.
I think we're at the end now. Do you have a closing argument?
No, look, I'd look forward to coming back here and talking about other aspects. But I also, to all of the listeners, I would really like to set up a foundation, the name of which tentatively could be Reform Australian Democracy Foundation. But I would like this to become a national, discussion for everybody to talk about this.
I think you're onto something, mate. I think it's definitely needed. There certainly are a lot of bright minds out there that could contribute to this. We're not going to agree with all of them. That's fine. But if we can find some common ground somewhere, I think that's the first step. So
yeah,
let's continue having these conversations. I'm definitely going to have you back on the show again because
thank you very much, Stephen.
And there's so much more that we can talk about. We can talk about election reform. I know you want to talk about open source software. So we'll take these issues one by one. I know the audience loves you, and there's always a big reaction to when you come on, and they love hearing what you have to say, and you're very thought provoking. So thank you very much, Kevin, and looking forward to working together with you on this and trying to push this forward.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I would really love that. And I don't have to lead it. I just be the throw in ideas and have other people argue. It's got to be done by consensus in the final analysis. There's no question of it.
Sure.
But I have lots and lots of ideas about a lot of things.
Yep, definitely. Look, I mean, I don't even think it needs a leader. It just needs good people that are willing to advance this country for our kids and future generations. Yeah. And like John, who called in before, 18 years old, he's getting promising. Active already. Good on him. Good.
Yeah, that's good.
We need more people, and even us older people. I'm not quite as old as you yet, Kevin, but but I will be at some point.
I've got to say, you're doing very well, Stephen. I'd vote for you, no question. I'd vote for you, in a heartbeat. So
I need somewhere to go to be. I need a home first. Anyway, that's another issue. And look, thank you everyone who has been active in the chat tonight. Thank you for everyone that's called in. That's a big part of this discussion, is having the feedback from the audience. It is exactly what we needed. I know we went into a few different directions that we didn't plan on, but that's the whole point of this. And if we were having a constitutional convention or something similar, it would go for days, because there's so much to talk about. We've crammed it into 2 hours, but there's so much more to talk about. So look, get involved. Send us emails. Kevin, what's your email again? What's the best way for people
Kevin
to
L, as in Kevin Loughrey, just Kevin L, all lowercase, at kevinloughrey.com.au, as you can see it there on the screen. Kevin L at kevinloughrey.com.au. Just say that you were watching us on the on Commanding the Narrative. I almost said the ex-candidates. On Commanding the Narrative, and we can commit a conversation, and you could join the forum, the foundation.
And if you want to email me, commandingthenarrative@outlook.com, it's very easy, or head to commandingthenarrative.com and sign up to the mailing list. And once I figure out MailChimp or whatever it's called, I'll be sending out weekly emails. And if we do start up with something with Kevin, that will all be in the mailing list. So you just head to the top right-hand corner, hit the sign-up button, and you can be on the mailing list and get weekly emails, stay up to date with all the podcasts, everything that we're doing, any articles that I might write or that I think that are important, and stay up to date. And to Tobias, he said, can you put it in the comments? I'll put it in the show notes. It won't be up straight away because it won't be in the live stream, but check it tomorrow. It should be there. You have Kevin's email, you have my email, you have the website, you have everything. So check all that out. I say it every single week. Please share this out to anyone that you think is interested, even if you think they're not interested. I think a lot of people need to hear these ideas. Not all of them may be perfect. I think Kevin's going to say they are.
No. Exactly the opposite. I'm simply saying, look, I'm throwing up all of what you could call straw men, and which could be the focus of discussion. And then it's got to be a foundation and a group of people who, all sort of take a vote in the end. What do you think about this? We go through it point by point.
Yeah.
And we get this thing nailed.
Yeah, but please
we have
share
a big publicity campaign.
Yep, share. Let's get this discussion going. Let's really invigorate people, give them some hope, because look, we the power is with the people, and if we can push government and pressure government, we can get things done. It's so important. So we rely on everyone. We rely on the audience. We rely on the people to get behind us. We can't do it all ourselves. So please share this out. Follow us. Head to the website. Sign up. And look, Kevin, I can't wait to have you back on the show again. I know it's going to be fantastic. Every interview with you is fantastic. Head to some previous interviews that we've had with Kevin on the ex-candidates. Check those out. I know people have been doing that throughout the week because I've been seeing comments come in specifically on your interviews. So people are watching them. They're there for eternity. They're online forever. So I think that's great stuff. Yep. So thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you all next time.